Good evening and welcome to the inaugural episode of Required Reading. I'm your host, Kevin Luis Fernandez, and tonight we have the distinct pleasure of speaking with photographer Michael Carlebach on his first photo book, Sunnyland, a compilation of photos spanning several decades while working at the University of Miami and for the Miami Tropic. So without further ado, Required Reading, Episode 1, Michael Carlebach, the Sunnyland interview.
I love photographing, and especially love photographing things that aren't photographed. That's one of the great things about photography, is that it's taking these moments out of time. I needed to learn how to do black and white photography, and I was drawn to it. Somebody had once said to me that the world is in color, but life is black and white. That made sense to me. I mean, in most of my pictures, even though they're black and white, they're about real life. And sometimes if it's in color, all you look at is the color. You know, that was never as important to me as other stuff. I still like black and white. Even digitally, I'm likely to change things to black and white.
Why did you put this book together?
Well, I'd spent 3 or 4 decades in Florida. I had this body of work. After I moved to North Carolina, I decided to try and do something with it. I put together another book with the same publisher called Some of Us, which is much wider ranging. It's not confined to Florida. Florida is an easy place to photograph. Everybody's sort of out there. And I took to Florida, and Florida took to me in a big way. And the light, South Florida light, is amazing. It's especially amazing if you've lived up north for a while, where it's always dark and gloomy. But Florida, the quality of light is just amazing. A lot of the stories that I did, I mean, like the story on the strippers, I'd passed this place a lot of times. Piggy's Nude Review. You know, it's one of those nondescript one-story buildings on the side of the road. And as soon as I got in there, I just thought, I saw pictures everywhere. It had so much atmosphere. And then what happened was these women would come out and they'd strip to three sort of rock and roll songs. First one, they'd be topless. The second one and the third one, they'd be completely butt naked. And then they'd come around and talk to everybody at the bars and, you know, try and get a tip. I'm sitting there. I had my camera on my shoulder, and this woman came out and she did her 3 dances, and she came, "Did you like my dance?" And I said, "Yeah, well, your dance was fine, but I'm really thinking of maybe taking some pictures in here." And she looked at my camera and she said, "Is that a Leica?" Then she said, "Are you familiar with the work of Henri Cartier-Bresson?" With a very nice French accent. You know, we chatted a little bit, and she said, "Well, if you want to photograph, you have to talk to Piggy." Eventually, I did talk to Piggy, and he didn't care if I photographed.
You shot a lot of photos at football games, but they're very untraditional photos, and it's not exactly like you were shooting like a typical media person at the football games.
Well, because other photojournalists, my friends, were really good at that, and they did all the action shots. And I wasn't particularly interested in that part of it. I was interested in all the other stuff, the sidelines, the fans, the mascots, the parade marchers, all of that. That other stuff is what nobody else photographed. So I had it to myself. That was the former Ibis. I guess it was pretty much a handmade costume, but that was a student in there peeking out of the beak. And The woman was a waitress at this little coffee shop that I used to drink way too much coffee at. She was pregnant, and I just off the cuff said, yeah, I really ought to photograph you and your husband. Her husband wasn't home yet. She said no, and I said, well, yeah, it would be a nice family picture. But he came in a few minutes later and immediately put his gun on the table there. And I don't know, that just made the picture. He wasn't thrilled. Boyfriends and husbands were never thrilled when I was photographing women. I mean, I spent about a year and a half photographing derelicts and alcoholics in Miami. And I sort of hooked up with this group called the Dade County Alcoholic Rehabilitation Program. But so I was photographing bums, basically. I mean, they weren't called homeless then. They were just called bums. And I spent a long time photographing them. I photographed them on the street, in flop houses, in court. And finally, I photographed them in the morgue. I may have never published many of those pictures. It's just a big stack of stuff. But I loved doing that. And doing that project was what made me decide to really be a photographer full time. In college, I was a French major, actually. I decided that wasn't for me. So at some point in my senior year, I got a used camera and began photographing around Hamilton, New York. After college, I went to work for George McGovern. He ran in 72. I graduated in 67. So I first met him probably in 1970 when he was sort of traveling around and testing the waters, as it were. My first real hero in photography was a man named Eugene Smith, who was the great Life magazine photographer. Loved his work, and I liked Cartier-Bresson. I still love pictures, all kinds of pictures by all kinds of photographers. I don't like to be optically close. I like to be physically close. There was a great Life magazine photographer. He once told a colleague, if your pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough. And it's true. I love photography because it's the only thing that can actually stop time. That ability to actually freeze a moment and then you have it forever. It just, for me, it's the central act of photography is freezing time, stopping it, so that you can re-examine and go back and really appreciate little slices of time. They're real and they're forever. I like that. They're not going to disappear. It's there. It's perfect.